And we are back on a whole other episode, which is actually part 2 of episode 28. That was quite bizarre. I don't know if that was my end or YouTube or what happened. I'm really sorry about that.
No worries. That's what happens when you work with technology.
Right?
No, it's okay.
But I was telling you a story about a roaster who I had tasted this dullness in his elixir for a couple of batches, by that point. And I didn't know what it was. And I was speaking to Scott about it. And I said, like, the shine has gone from this coffee. And he said, oh, he's baking it. I'm like, well, okay, so how does this look like on a roast curve? So I can explain it to him. He said, his coffee's crashing. He's baking it. So, of course, I contacted the roaster and I said, hey, listen, do you think I could have a look at your roast curves? And he said, what are you looking for? And I said, I'm just looking to see if the coffee's crashing because it's tasting baked. Mm-hmm. And he said, it's not crashing. I'm like, okay. Do you mind if I have a look at the curves? And he's like, yeah, no problem. So he sent me the last 3 batches that he had roasted for us. And it was crashing so hard that there was no other word for it. It wasn't a little crash. It was like a severe crash. And I had kind of, pointed it out. And he's like, well, he said, I think the word crash is a bit severe, don't you think? I'm like, no, that's the technical term. Like, it's crashing. The curve's crashing. And anyway, we got into it and he refused to believe that his coffee could possibly crash. There's no way his coffee could crash. There's no way his coffee's baked. And he had a flick on the end of it. And he said, look, I admit the flick's there and I'm going to figure out how to fix that. But this coffee's not crashing. I'm like, well, this is something that I think that we suffer from in our industry, right? We don't want to just say, I actually can't admit that I don't know how to fix that. So I'm just going to pretend that it doesn't exist.
Well, it happens in all kinds of industries, and that I think it's a kind of a natural reaction. Sometimes it's like, oh no, there's no problem, but some people are very good at it. To immediate, it's like, oh yeah, there might be a problem. That's about what do you think? What's your approach, right? And they're very open, and others they're more like blocking immediately, but then go back home, do their homework, and then later come back with like, I made a few adjustments. I'm like, great, that works. That works for me.
Code.
Whatever the term is, I don't
care as long as you're roasting better, right?
Yeah, and it goes for many things. I think it's more like a natural reaction sometimes, especially when you try very hard. It's more like you try very hard. You try to make it perfect because you give it to a great brand and you want to make everything perfect. It can happen. I mean, the same thing here. Right now, I thought like, this is a great opportunity. Technology is crashing on us.
Yeah, and we have to go with the natural forces, don't we?
Immediately, it's like, is it my internet? Is it my computer? And it's like, it might be, but I did a little bit of. I closed all the programs. I did a restart before we talk. I made certain things that I know that we have a better chance. Mm-hmm. But we don't. Certain things
we'll never know.
No, exactly. And well, send your text. See if you can get on. Awesome. If you can't get on, well, it's sad, but it's what it is. We have a lot of fun. And,
yes. My thing with it is, though, that I think as an industry, we have, and perhaps it's not just the coffee industry, but I know that this absolutely is happening in the coffee industry in the sense that the interpretation was, you're telling me my coffee's crashed, so therefore you're trying to find a fault with what I'm doing. And it couldn't be further from the truth. All I'm trying to do is, hey, dude, if we can actually fix this thing, your product's going to be better, so therefore my product's going to be better.
Right, everybody tries.
And then the customer's going to be happier. So I'm not saying what you're doing is wrong. Like, we love what you do. We just want to all be doing better in everything that we can do. And so therefore, I'm not going to try and put out like a product that's half-assed. At the end of the day, my customers are still going to love this, but I want them to love it more. And if we can have them loving it more, let's work together to identify, like, if you taste it and you think that I could be using better water, I want you to tell me that. I want you to, I want you to try and tell me the things that I can do better for what I'm doing. So then my customer is ultimately going to be happier. And if my customer is ultimately going to be happier, they're going to have a much more enjoyable experience with my product. And therefore it's a no-brainer decision for them to want to engage with the brand, with the product, and tell their friends about it and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of a win-win for all of it.
I think it's very clear, and it's almost like a no-brainer. It sometimes just takes this extra second to take the step back. And it's like, what does she want right now? Does she want to insult me? No, because I have a great relationship. Does she want to get a better price? No, it's not about price. We have a deal, so it's not that. Is it like, why does she tell me it's crashing? It's like, it could be because she's concerned about her product, and maybe there is something going on. So I think it's sometimes those things, and it helps a lot if you not impulsively go back into the game right away. And so, like, oh, what is it? What is it really? What's going on?
Yeah, and I mean that was a learning point for me as well. It's this idea of, okay, so you didn't achieve what you needed the first go round. You mentioned this to him. He got his back up about it. He felt very attacked for no reason. Like it was a very nice conversation. Had great conversations, but this was the first time when I had said to him, "Hey, listen," because I had been informed. I had got some knowledge, and I'd taken the time to understand it. And once I understood it, I went to him and said something. What I realized was I was uncovering the fact that he didn't know what crashing was.
Yeah.
And because I had uncovered that, he had felt defensive.
Yeah. And
so we actually, unfortunately, were never able to resolve that. He was unwilling to see what that situation was. But I would definitely approach it differently next time.
Well, I think I hope there's this, there's learning on both sides.
And you never know.
That's always exactly in the future. He might like, well, it just the next deal. It's very natural that those things happen in relationships where you not always get the chance to fix it in the current relationship, but you will get a chance to fix it in the next one.
I hope so.
Yeah, for sure.
How much do you attribute the success of the business? This is your first business endeavor?
Yeah.
How much do you attribute Cropster's success to relationships, and how much do you attribute Cropster's success to product?
Honestly, what is there if there's no relationships? So I think it's just that's how we got started. Without those relationships with green buyers, and Jeff Watts back then was very influential with Intelli Coffee. He came to Colombia. He was one of my
champion, isn't he?
Yeah, he was one of my first mentors. He told me what cupping is.
So you've had a Jeff Watts hug.
I have them all the time. Yes,
aren't they the best hugs in the world?
There's no other hugs out there.
I've talked about them before on this podcast. I'm like, if you've never had a Jeff Watts hug, you must get a Jeff Watts hug, because it feels like you're being like enveloped and just brought into aren't they the best, Norbert?
Oh, they are the best. No, it's fantastic. It's
he's a great human.
And they're talked about everywhere.
They really are.
And especially when it's about people who are not accustomed to that closeness. But it's just, Jeff Watts is Jeff Watts. He's such a beautiful person, and that's just part of this expression, who he is and how he connects with people. He really tries to connect with you, and not just authentic. Hey, how's it going? It's like, oh, what is your name? And he remembers. And it's like, what do you do? And who are you? And it's like, let's have a hug. Let's connect. This is very cool. Very unique in a way.
Every SCA. One of the things is, if Jeff's there, even if it's just that I'm running to a meeting and he's running to a meeting, it happened this year. I got to the top of the escalators and Jeff was there talking with someone, and I'm like, I've got to run to a meeting. And he's like, come, give me a hug. And I was like, oh, my day is made. This human. This human. And in 3 seconds, you just feel like you're the most important person in his world.
Yeah, that's very true.
It's really lovely. It's really lovely. But you were saying, sorry, about Jeff Watts. Every time.
No, I mean, it's about those relationships, you know. So it's the relationship with Jeff and his friends. I mean, back then he was still traveling with Stumptown guys, Counterculture, George Howell, you know, all people I had no idea who they are, and you know, they appeared, and with many people, exporters. We worked with some importers came, and they all like, yeah. What do we do here? How does it work? Direct trade was not born then. That name came about 5 years later into play. But they did it already.
Well, those guys were defining it, weren't they?
Yeah. So they just did that. It's like, well, we need to dig deeper. We want to meet the farmers. We want to be involved. And that's it was amazing. So that's why I think relationships are very important. It ultimately is also it's also how you when you reflect on how you buy stuff. You buy it from someone you kind of can relate to, or you like, or you feel. I mean, especially stuff like if you buy a car, if you buy a new AC system, if you buy the stuff you know nothing about, and still they're not rocket science. You could buy them online, but still you go somewhere where you feel someone explains it a certain way, or you trust that person helps you in the future. So they are not there for this one-time experience, but they are actually a little bit, and that's a relationship, right? And through that relationship, we got the opportunity to learn what the market needs, or what the market doesn't need, and where the market is, and that helped us to form our products, and it still does. So we still have huge feedback from so many customers. Some of them, when we meet them initially, and we take the time. So sometimes at SCA, it happens every year. I talk to someone new, and they's like, "Well, I thought Cropster is this," and it's like, "Oh, yeah, it's also this, but we also do this and this and this, and that's where we come from." And it's like, "Oh my God, I had no idea. This is great." And then, or customers comes by and it's like, "Ah, Norbert, I'm so sorry to bother you." It's like, what's the bother? What do you think is the bother? It's like, I have an idea, or I have this question. It's like, it's not bother. It's just a normal thing. Just ask your question. If I can, I'm happy to answer it. And it's like, not many people do that. Not many companies do that.
No, you're right.
And it's like, well, I don't know, but it's I wouldn't have it any other way.
No, I mean, accessibility is everything.
You listen to us. And it's like, well, you know, the only thing I can always guarantee is I listen to you. I cannot always guarantee I can solve your problem. I cannot always guarantee this will be done tomorrow or so. So, but we will always listen, and we always try to communicate back. So, and that's awesome. I mean, that's what the whole fun is about, honestly. That's why I think relationship is everything.
I agree. You know, it's funny you say all of that, because when I was speaking to Paul Bartholomew from Cropster a couple of weeks ago, he's a legend, by the way. He's such a sweetheart. He really is.
It really is.
Such a sweet guy. He was telling me about, is it Cropster Cup?
That's a taste app, cupping app.
Yeah, and there's another part where you have you connect sellers and buyers.
That's the hub, Cropster Hub.
Cropster Hub. So, you know, as somebody who doesn't roast, again, I just want to make that very clear for the millionth time. But I've never been inside Cropster other than to look at roast curves that people have shown me. So I wasn't aware that Cropster does so much more than help you roast. You guys help people with grain buying.
Yeah.
You're kind of a hub to connect people, right?
So it's, you know, it's we work with all parts of the supply chain. We really started out to work with farmers first. So that was the first connection to coffee I had. I was working with coffee farmers in Colombia. And then through those, I met the coffee buyers and the coffee traders. And then they all wanted more information. They wanted more quality control. They wanted better quality. And it's like, well, we need to connect them. I also, you know, from a personal background, I did an electrical industrial high school, so technology, and then I went back into social work for 5 years in Austria, and I did some youth work and worked with disabled for a year. And then I went back to university to study IT. So I like the social things a lot. I love it. And I love technology. And it was always a little bit a dilemma for me. How can I bring those things together? I like databases. I like organization. I like technology. I had a smartphone or a cell phone when it was not, when it just came out in Austria, really, and those things. I had an email address when it was not so common. And I was doing social work, and then people was like, well, why do you need a computer? It's like, well, I connect with my people. Yeah. That's what it is about. It's not, and I don't want to spend sending. I had to invite people to events, so they were still writing labels, by hand. And it's like, I don't want to do that. I just print them, and I put them on an envelope, and the computer does all this for me. And I do this in 10 minutes instead of 2 hours. Because I can spend 2 hours more talking to people on the phone, writing emails, and connecting with them in person. So that's kind of so that's a little bit a long thing. So social work and IT, and the social work also brought me to sell fair trade coffee at the church door, or be involved in developing projects or development projects from different angles. And the work I did at the research center was research for development. Mm-hmm. It never gave me much satisfaction because it was important, because we all know it's important to help and to be mindful and open, but it's not sustainable, in my opinion. That was the frustration. We got a grant for 2-3 years. We did those projects, and then we had to move on to the next where the money was. And
there's no long-term progress happening, right?
Yeah.
You're not long-term investment in seeing the whole thing through.
Exactly. So you establish some research, and then hopefully someone reads it and someone applies it. So there is a hope for that, but you're not involved in that, and
it's not efficient either.
That was too little for me. So I thought, well, let's take another bet and another approach, and that's the company. If the company runs sustainable or runs well, it will be sustainable, and that's that's another approach why Cropster was important. And first, we wanted to work with the farmers to empower them to understand their quality, their processes, and then offer their products into their supply chain, into the specialty supply chain. But that was a little bit too much. That was just.
I was just thinking how you take that on, because essentially what you're saying, you want to talk about traceability, right?
Exactly, traceability, process control. They know about their quality, about their cup, about everything. So I thought of it like, if the farmer gives you farm data, someone will give them back cupping data, for example.
Okay.
And it's a fair exchange of information. So I sometimes feel like the farmers are stripped of all the information. We go there, ask them 2 days, very long questionnaires, and then we go home and then add that value to something else. And that's not quite fair. I mean, we could talk for another 2 hours here, and I don't want to drag it really out, but I think it's not very sustainable on the long run. It needs to be done maybe on a short term on some projects, but I just want to give everybody in the supply chain a fair chance to participate. And technology can do that. And we do that. It's just making that shift of training farmers, technology, of hand-holding, of support. That what almost broke our neck. That's how Cropster could not survive financially. Because we could not visit a farm 5 times and support them in person on a $2 a year subscription. It's just not possible, right? But there was not. I thought it's not fair to charge them more than $2. It's not. There's millions out there, so yes, it scales. We just need to find another way. And so we moved up the supply chain, and we are moving back again. So we still do a lot of work with farmers. I was traveling a lot in South and Central America to visit all those farmer groups and organizations. And the technology has changed. I mean, now we are again what I was talking about 10 years ago is now already kind of common knowledge of, well, they have smartphones now. They are connected. They know how important certain processes are at the farm. There's still need for more technology. I'm very positive there, but there's already more understanding why it's important.
How do you feel that the direction that the sea market is going in? Because let me frame this let me frame this
The
first.
C word, I heard it.
I know, right? So the last time that we were at the prices that we are on the C market right now was 12 years ago, right? We didn't have a lot of the technology that we have these days. So this will be the first time the C market has gone to the level that it's gone with some of the technology that we have available to us. What do you see could go differently this time, if anything, based on the technology that we have?
Nothing went differently this time. It's not what will go. It was what has happened. It happened already. Someone is already betting against the market,
right,
very strongly. That's why it happens. As long as ice and as long as coffee is traded on the stock exchange, that's what can and will happen. That's that we wouldn't even have to change the game. And I think, stock regulations, yes, there is some, and I'm sure there's also talks about all those things, but that's a different approach. And I feel we should have a choice, and I think we have a choice. Not always, not with any product, but especially coffee gives us a great opportunity to buy from the C market or to buy direct trade. And I think as a consumer, by supporting those who do direct trade, who tell us the farm gate price, who tell us, hey, we are not paying them 90 cents, we are paying them $3, or we're paying them, that's versus support, and that's a choice. I can get, with many other products too, I can get my industrial produced eggs for 90 cents a dozen, or I pay $7. That's a choice. I have or I don't have. I mean, but if it's really important to me that the coffee farmers are better off, then I'm looking for those supply chains.
And I'm assuming that there are farmers and roasters that operate in the commodity space that use Cropster. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And is there anything there, do you think?
Well, yeah, I think there's something there too, because our software really, it makes them organize their company more efficient. That's an immediate benefit, but it also gives them this what if? So what if we separate out some lots? What if we connect on Cropster Hub? What if we do the roasting a little bit different? What if we, so they have already a tool that they could venture into those things.
Great.
And they have a connection point. So there's hope, Is it too high? Maybe. I don't know. Maybe I'm just romantic here. But there's always hope. So
well, my whole thing with that is that this is different. There has to be something different about this time that the C market's as low as it is. There's going to be a bounce back to that. And we don't know how severe it's going to be, but we know it's going to happen because it's happened the 20 other times or whatever it's happened before. There'll be a snap, like a rubber band snapback. And that won't only affect the C market, it's going to affect specialty as well because of the relationship that farmers have. Even subconsciously, people who are specialty farming are going to say, well, if the C market's at $3 now, I'm not going to sell you this for $5 because I was selling it to you for $5 when the C market was at 96 cents.
And that's where we need to rethink the whole thing. We cannot changing the game but not changing the rules, or changing the rules and not changing the game. That's just I know a lot of people work on differentials, and that's one of the criticisms I still have. It's like, no, we need a true direct trade works differently. True direct trade works that the farmer is empowered to establish their price in a way that they know, first of all, know their production, which is hard to do, or it's a learning. They know what the production cost is. They know what they would have to charge to be profitable. They would know what their project is and what their how their market approach is, and then that's how a price is made, not because it's made somewhere.
It's not relational.
It's exactly. So I think
it shouldn't be anyway, right?
Well, there's also reasons why the system is where it is. I'm just not a big fan of it, and if I can make a change, I will work towards that change. And that goes through at any level. It's what products we buy, the way we invest our money if we invest it, all this. We have to, we have to be real. If we think, well, the world will change on its own, then in reality it's other people who do that for us. But it will not change on its own.
Can you see any way that, like, is Cropster looking at trying to help that situation? Is there any ideas for what we know is coming with regards to this snapback effect that we're going to have with the C market?
Well, we are a small company still. We are not going to invest or like change the financial market. So that's
no.
not the approach. Just saying.
Thank you for the disclaimer.
So our approach, and where we can help, is provide systems who connect buyers and sellers more directly. Cropster Hub is there, and connect them on values other than price.
That's awesome.
So let's have the discussion about a cupping experience, a cup experience. Let's have this discussion about how that coffee was farmed. Let's bring that story to the people. Let's have the barista know they're dealing with a valuable product, because that's where the ultimate, it's marketing 101. Paul would be the person to really sit here, but it's the way you perceive certain things, and that needs to be communicated. And it still needs after 20 years. I think it is fantastic that the specialty market has grown so much, and people out there know about it. But there's still so much to do to really get into next levels.
It's only grown on. It's been a skewed growth, hasn't it? Like the front end has grown astronomically of specialty. The front end of the specialty coffee supply chain has skyrocketed, especially in places like Australia, and it's booming in a big way here in America. But the back end, the farmers are getting paid less now than they were 30 years ago. So if we want to say that specialty, and I mean on the C market, so
absolutely.
If we want to kind of spread that out and make that across the board kind of growth, we need to be making sure that the back end is getting as much attention as the $1 million fit outs that we've got happening in the cafes. Like, maybe spend $500,000 on the fit out of your cafe and allocate that budget, split it between spending more money on coffee and education to your customers to bring them to drinking a greater cup of specialty coffee.
Absolutely, and I think that the consumer decides. If the consumer decides, if there's this $1 million store here and this $200,000 store here, but the $2,000 store is not so fancy, not so nice, but has outstanding coffee, and people choose to buy there and go there, well, that's a message. Nobody likes to spend $1 million on something which is not necessary. I think that, especially in the northern hemisphere, I think people are very, very smart about that. Australia, no, southern hemisphere, but you know where I grew up, so it's I think that happens already sometimes. I mean, you have those specialty cafes who are not backed by big money, doing their own thing in a niche, and grow from there. G&B is a great example. They just were focused on quality. They did their thing. They kept true to their message, and yes, they grew. Fantastic. I love it. It's awesome, And with the farmers, I think it's the same thing. If you look at some of the, again, I mean, there's many names out there, really. There's many companies who try to do the right thing and have established their own supply chains. Yeah, paying consistently those $3 or what's necessary. And
7 Seeds are a great example of that. Mark Dundon, if you
Mark is fantastic, of course. Yeah, good friend. Yes,
absolutely. 7 Seeds are great. Onyx Coffee Lab, we have Andrea and John from Onyx Coffee Lab. Everyone who is a roaster for Elixir is somebody who advocates for that and does the same thing. We changed our buying practices with regards to roasted coffee so that we only buy coffees that people have paid a fair price for.
Fantastic. And I think that's what we need. We need those businesses who do that. And, people call for certifications. That has its own 2-hour talk at least.
And I love your sarcasm.
Well, yeah. Because ultimately the end consumer is not always able to study the material in depth. They are not always able to differentiate. Why is this product better from the other? And there is dirty marketing or unclear marketing. There's people who put direct trade on their bags and are actually not.
And it's commodity coffee.
Trading so directly, or have a 10% in their blend, or stuff like that. So there's a lot of shortcuts who you could potentially do and be commercially successful. Is it ethical? Well, that's a whole new question. But I think that's where Cropster comes in as a technology solution. We can trace, we can provide more information if people want it and are open to it. Information in general is a great thing. There's more demand for information than ever, but it's also not for everybody, and we need to be careful how to present it. Because you can put everything on a label, and then suddenly the coffee buyer is like, oh my God, this is too complex. Let's get this. Let's get the colorful bag and get out of here. So we need to be careful of where to start and how to educate and how to kind of dribble that down into the masses. And once the masses are aware of certain problems or certain dynamics, there's real change.
I was on a podcast earlier this week for a financial investing podcast. They wanted me to talk. I had alerted the person who owns the podcast to the fact that the C market was doing what it was doing. And he's like, you realize none of us know that this is happening. I'm like, well, clearly the people that are actually buying coffee at 96 cents on the dollar know that it's happening. Anyway, so he wanted me to come on and talk about the C market. And I said to him, I am the least qualified person to talk about the C market. I know a little bit about it, but we had a general discussion around it. And he said to me, so what can people do? Like, what should people be watching? And I said, well, we can't influence this in any other way other than our buying practices. At the end of the day, if people want to, and let me frame this part, he was talking about the fact that he buys a true pound of coffee, not just a 12-ounce bag, but a true pound of coffee from Pete's for $18 a pound. And it's not considered specialty. And if the commodity market snaps back, he said, what will happen to my coffee, the price of my coffee? And I said, listen, if you really want to do something to secure the cost and for it to be unaffected, or what we expect to be unaffected by your coffee buying practices, go and find a specialty coffee shop that has direct relationships with the farm. And if the C market snaps back, they shouldn't be affected because they have relationships with the farm that are independent from the C market. And that should be fine. If you're paying, let's say you're paying $20 a pound or $22 a pound for that pound of coffee, you technically should be unaffected by the snapback that happens from the commodity market. At the end of the day, that's the way we turn things, right?
Right. No, absolutely. And I mean, the big companies or the bigger companies, and Pete's is, I think, very influential in the specialty. In my personal opinion, there's a lot of good people working there and trying hard. But it also has a scale, of course, where they need to be operating a little bit differently. And let's give the Pete's an incentive to move into a certain direction. I think that's all they need.
That would be great.
Because they have a certain market power behind them. Let's give the Starbucks, let's give the Nestle's, let's give them a reason. They are not, I mean, they're not at all stupid. They are very well aware.
Not at all.
And if there's a trend and if they can go into a certain market, they will. And once they do it with a lot of power. So that even a bigger change can happen. But we need to be very careful to set it up in the right way. It is not easy, so that it doesn't get immediately compromised again. It's very hard. It's very, very hard.
It's a very complex situation, isn't it?
But it's an interesting one. I love it. I love to be part of it. It's not something I turn away or turn my head and it's like, oh, this is ugly. This is ugly. I can see ugly. I can deal with ugly. But can we do something about it? Is there an approach? Is there an angle? Is there something we can do? And Well, same with founding a company. Sometimes you need patience. It is not done in a day. Change is not happening overnight. If it is, sometimes think about it twice and look at it again, because it might be not good change. So yeah, that's really where I would say let's keep on it, and so many people do. So you are in good company if you're interested. That's what I would say.
Oh, hey, and the thing is, we actually can change it. Like we've got enough people talking about it now. And, it's certainly part of my mission to be talking about it as much as I can outside of our industry. When I get invited to talk about it on a podcast, sure, I'm not the person to be talking about the C market. I can talk very generally about what's going on and what it means that the price has dropped. But it also gives me an opportunity to alert a much bigger audience than is the specialty market about, hey, what are your buying decisions based on right now? Because did you know that if you are supporting the commodity market, you could potentially be supporting sex trafficking and slave labor and all of this other kind of stuff that you are not conscious that you are supporting?
Yeah. And that's the chocolate industry is child or slavery is still a thing, right? And there's some companies that are very loud about it and very vocal and trying to really change a lot there. Same in coffee. We can make a change. I think one very good approach is for roasters, for example, look into B Corp. So the B Corp certification is, I think, one of the most interesting right now, because it first of all, it can help you streamline certain things like energy use, which actually saves you money. So it's if you don't do it for the environment, do it for yourself. Great. But it also looks into how you deal with your suppliers. So it goes a little bit beyond only your company. And companies like Patagonia and they are already very big into those things. They look at their supply chain. They have changed stuff really.
Yep. So, another word for it is conscious capitalism, right?
Yes, absolutely. So there's many words. I think it's always important not to hide behind them. Same as, because that's really the tricky thing. If you suddenly becomes a word. No, you need to understand it, and it's not hard. It is how you deal with your neighbor. What if you buy that coffee from your neighbor? What would you do? Well, you would talk to him. You would deal about a price. Would you want to do that your neighbor go poor? No, you wouldn't. So a few basics. It's not. Sometimes I think it's a little common sense, but then again,
it's a lot of common sense and decency and empathy and. How about I don't just see me as the only person in the world? Like I don't have to, I don't have to be the only person that wins from this transaction. Right. What if we could come up with a solution where every stakeholder is a winner?
But think about that neighbor. If that neighbor is happy, how happy person you become?
Yeah.
Because it affects you right away. So it's.
You just gave me chills.
Anyway, yeah.
What a great place to end this conversation on such a happy note. It's just, I would love for people to be thinking more about that, in that, like, if I have a happy neighbor, Al Keating from Coffee Supreme mentioned that exact thing.
Awesome.
When he came on the podcast, he said that he changed his philosophy in life by saying, how do I treat my neighbors and how can I look after them more? And if my neighbors are happy, I live in a happy community. And if that's the case, my life is happier. And I think we could all a word to that. Thank you so much, Norbert. It was so lovely to chat to you. I can't wait to chat to you again.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It was a true pleasure. And good luck for Australia.
Thank you.
I know you don't need it, but have fun. It's probably a better word.
I think I need more luck than people think. I'm very nervous about the whole thing, but nervous and excited all at the same time. It's a first time doing something, but I appreciate the sentiment. Thank you so much.
Will be awesome.
We'll talk to you again soon. Bye, Norbert.
Thank you, Lee. Bye-bye.